live.
All right, welcome to the House Judiciary Committee this Tuesday afternoon, January 27th, and we're continuing to take testimony on H626, involving voyeurism and disclosure of sexually explicit images without consent. And we're going to start, I'm going to change the order a little bit. We're going to start with Matthew Raymond from the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. If you could join us, and nice to see you again. It's been a couple of years, I think.
Yeah, I think it has been.
You didn't bring the dog.
No, I did not.
Well, that's sad. So if you could identify yourself for the record and proceed. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, I'm Matthew Raymond. I'm the commander of the Vermont Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. We're a task force that we have one sole mission, and that's to protect children, to prevent the victimization of children by people using the internet and technology to exploit. Our typical cases are child sexual abuse material cases, luring, enticement, and sextortion. And that's what I came to talk about here. It was the sextortion piece of this law and how we deal with this all the time, unfortunately. So the ICAC perspective, Vermont ICAC perspective on the sextortion piece is, I think everybody here probably already knows. I, first of all, need to apologize. I didn't get to watch any of the prior testimony. This is just an extremely busy time of year for us, and I have the time to fit it in. So I apologize if I'm repeating what's already been said. So it's sextortion from our perspective is a very serious threat facing our nation's youth, and has resulted in over 30 suicides that we know nationwide. So historically, we saw sex-based sextortion. So the victims were primarily young females. The conversations were long in nature, from days to months long. The perpetrators portrayed themselves as peers and engaged in grooming techniques, making gradual requests over time, sometimes providing gifts to the victims, gaining their confidence. The suspects were not aggressive until they received a child sexual abuse material, and then quickly turned and threatened to expose them if they didn't get more and more content. The sole purpose was more content. Usually the suspects were US based, and we tracked them down and arrested them. Then around 2019, we started seeing a switch. We still get those cases today, about the same amount we've always got them. But we started seeing financial based sextortion, which we'd never seen before. And the victims then, or now, with that, are primarily male. We're seeing ages 13 to 17 are the primary ages. They're very short in duration, a maximum of hours. They progress very fast. The suspects always portray themselves as a female. The chats are extremely aggressive. They always ask for genital and face pictures in the same image because they can quickly extort them that way. The requests come fast. The sole purpose is to obtain money. They usually ask for a lot of money in the beginning, and then they negotiate down to whatever they can get. They threaten to expose the child, offering screenshots of their friends list, saying this is who we're going to send it to. We know who your parents are, based off their social media presence. And if they're paid, it doesn't stop. They just keep coming. Sometimes they'll take a 2-day break, and then they'll come right back at the victim again. And we know that from contact with victims. So the suspects for financial-based sextortion are largely not US-based. We're seeing a lot of copycat people that found out they can try to make money this way, and they get caught and arrested. But the vast majority come from Nigeria, the Ivory Coast, the Philippines, and India, actually. However, again, we are seeing some US-based actors now. Again, I call it kind of like copycatting, because they found out they could make money that way. So with these foreign actors, some of them are actually organized gangs, and sometimes they have a US-based money mule assisting, and that's to get around restrictions on sending that companies have put in because of this. So so that started, again, we were seeing it starting around 2019. And then by the time 2022 was here, these cases had ballooned, and NECMEC, I think they were reporting like a 300% increase at that time in these type of cases. So Vermont's been no exception to this. We've seen it just blow up with financial basics, sextortion. We deal with them almost on a weekly basis now. Normally, we're having the victims here in Vermont, so you have to realize because there's no geographic boundaries to this crime, the perpetrators are in one place and the victim are another. Rarely are you ever going to see it all be in Vermont. So again, we're dealing with victims on a weekly basis here in Vermont. We have had cases of the perpetrators here in Vermont. We have not had a financial based one here, but we have had several over the years of the sexual based. We just had one, I think, 3 weeks ago. Just got the person arrested. So, you know, we always instruct. We have handouts that we provide. We have cards. We have a number of different things that we give out. We always give the same recommendations. Do not pay them. Paying them is not going to solve the problem. It's just going to get them coming back to you. It's kind of like interacting with a telemarketer. You're just going to get more. So we tell them stop all contact, block them, report them to the platform, not to delete the communication, preserve the whatever device they're on, and contact the police, report it to NECMEC, to change their passwords on all their social media accounts, because unfortunately, sometimes during the extortion part, they actually extort them for their passwords to try to take over their accounts. And that's because then they can get into that friend group fast and extort many more people. Kind of like the daisy chain of extortion. You know, we, on our education piece, we try to tell them to reach out to someone they trust, a parent, an older sibling. Many times they're afraid to come to the police right away, not because of the police, there's some embarrassment. Again, it's not that they're worried about getting in trouble. They're more worried about people knowing. So that's very hard for them. So, and then there's also like a secondary exploitation that can happen is there's these services popping up that promise to investigate their cases or get their images taken down. And that's another scam on top of a scam that we're seeing. And we also refer them to NECMEC's Take It Down tool. People are familiar. It's a, you can report if you've provided an image of yourself and don't want it out there, you can report it to NECMEC. And it's really just providing the hash of the image, and then they scour the internet on the indexable part of the internet for that to get it taken down anywhere that it might be, servers anywhere. So that's basically what we're seeing in Vermont. We some on the sex-based extortion. One of the worst examples in Vermont was a number of years ago. We had a case where so there's 61 ICACs nationwide. Some states have more than one because of their geographic size or population density. Vermont, of course, is small in both regards, so we only have one statewide. But we all work together. Again, if there is a suspect in one state and a victim in another, we co-work against. And then the state where the suspect resides is where we generally do the charging. But in this case, we had another ICAC contact us that they had arrested somebody, and going through their devices, they found evidence of sextortion that had occurred, unfortunately, like 3 years prior. And they had the IP addresses, but you can't go to a service provider 3 years later, their logs are long gone, to figure out who the subscriber is. So we had to go old school police work and figure out who this child was. It took us a few weeks, but we were able to locate her. And when we went there, it was incredibly sad. It had been 3 years, and the parents couldn't understand what had happened. This was a three-sport athlete that just dropped out of, stopped participating. We got out of all social media, lost her friend groups, isolated herself, had severe depression. And what we ended up finding out was she had met somebody online, made a really good connection. Unfortunately, these people are very good at grooming, and got the first picture sent, I say consensually, but and then it quickly turned and the person became very aggressive. asking for more and more and worse content, which culminated, unfortunately, in her perpetrating on her sister, right, the guy's behest, until he moved on to somebody else. So it had created a train wreck of her life, her sister's life. Fortunately, we were able to get her services, her sister's services, and uncover this, thankfully, to the other ICAC as well for all the work they did on uncovering this. But these crimes have real significance. We're seeing again, suicides nationwide. It's going to make a train wreck of someone's life. And that brings me to the recommendations I would have on the. I don't know if it's changed since what was introduced. That's what I have.
We're still working off of that one.
Okay, that's why I just want to make sure I was not wasting everybody's time. So the first thing I would change, and again, I've concentrated on the sextortion piece of this. So under 2606, on my printout, it's page 9 of 14 that I'm on, where it actually starts the new that no person shall knowingly disclose a visual image of an identifiable person. It has the words without the person's consent, which I think are not needed in there because obviously if you're
Oh, this is towards the bottom on line one.
I'm on B1.
Oh, B1, okay.
Line 8, thank you.
Line 8, thank you.
In front of me. Yeah.
Oh, okay, so, right.
So without the person's consent, I think that's unneeded language and just one more, everything you put in here is just one more element that we have to prove and we have to gather when we're investigating these things. I think it's obvious it's not if the intent is to harass, threaten, then it's never with consent. I wouldn't believe. And then that repeats itself on line 21.
Yeah, we had caught that one. That's.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
So that, thank you for pointing out there was another spot where we needed to look at that.
Okay.
Thanks.
And then on that same page, under 14, making these 2-year misdemeanors, makes it pretty ineffectual law actually, because if, again, like I had testified to, that the perpetrators are actually in another state, we can't even extradite to hold them accountable because you're making a law that's a misdemeanor, which is not useful for us. So I would increase the penalties. I mean, these are really ruining people's lives. It should be a felony at a minimum. And again, the sextortion piece, it repeats itself on page 10, line 17. A person who violates this shall be imprisoned not more than 2 years. Again, that makes it a misdemeanor.
Can you back up a little bit?
Yep.
Explain a little bit further the concept that if it's not a felony, you can't extradite or have.
Yeah, so like when we're flagging somebody in NCIC for an extraditable crime, then it depends on the rules of that state and the rules of our state on extraditing. And making it a felony is what makes it being able to be posted in NCIC and hold and verify the warrant and get them. So misdemeanors generally are not extradited across the board.
And this is a particular crime, just so I want to make sure I understand that more often than not, the perpetrator is not.
You're rarely going to find the perpetrator. It's not, you're not doing this to your neighbor. It's if somebody's fishing online and finding somebody. You think of the population of the internet, the random probability that they're both from Vermont is very small. So I do this every day, and I never see that. Our victims, in the case we just did, which was a sex-based sextortion case last month, the suspect was in Vermont, but the victim was in another state. And the other thing you have to know is these are not one-off. These are not one-hit wonders. Okay, when you uncover somebody doing this, they're doing it to dozens, if not hundreds of kids. They just rinse and repeat, both the sex-based and the financial. These are people that are motivated out there and they're doing it like it's their job. When we go through their computers, we see that. I've never seen somebody do this once and be done with it. Anytime that we're going through the devices, we're seeing just a repeat of the same exact language, multiple things.
Are they selling the images that they?
Now, so it depends. So rarely are the sexual based extortions interested in the money or selling stuff. They're trading for more content. They use them kind of like trading cards. for more content. But, and the financial base are not interested in the sexual aspect of this. They're doing it because they found a population. There's no nice way of saying this. But boys are dumb, unfortunately, when it comes to this. And you'll see 13 to 17-year-old boys have an attractive person online asking them for this, and they, boom, give it up in 2 seconds. They found a population they can exploit, unfortunately, very easily. And it's something that's extremely embarrassing. That, you know, all the tools are right there for them. They know who their friend list is. They know how to exploit them. So these kids are freaking out. And they do anything they can to pay them because they think it's going to stop it. And that's what they're doing. And so if that's why we tell them, say no. Rarely ever do we see them actually post the images or provide the images, because they're not interested in that. They're interested in making money. When they realize they're not going to make money from this person, they move on. We can't say it never happens, of course, because there's never any absolutes in this stuff. But it's rare that they actually have a vendetta to post your images and afterwards. They're just looking for the quick buck and they move on.
So you had a flyer that, I think you had a flyer.
Yeah, we have different iterations of them. I brought them so I didn't have to type it
That
myself.
type of thing.
What's that? I'm sorry.
I think you said the flyer is informative for the kids to do this, don't do that.
Right, yeah. Oh, when we're doing education pieces.
Okay, that was my next question.
Yeah.
Okay. So, education in the schools, I assume?
Yeah, so we do education. We just went down and taught a piece at the academy for new police officers to understand this and to reach out for us if any of this happens. So typically, if a sextortion case happens at Vermont, they're passing it off to, if it involves children. And we have been involved in adult ones. I helped a few years ago. I helped Kuzi with a case where there was a guy on Snapchat. Kind of have to be careful because I'm not sure if that case has actually been adjudicated. So,
Is there any education to kids?
yes, and then we do. Yeah, sorry, I got off
Okay,
track.
then those officers.
Yeah, so
Okay.
then we also provide sextortion-based education as well. So basically, our ICAC runs off. We have like 3 different legs to our stool: investigations, forensics, and then education. And I always used to say we're never going to wrest our way out of this. Education is the key, but unfortunately, you know, things change over time, and I think it's a tool that's very important, and we put a lot of effort into that. But we are seeing a lot of infant and toddler abuse now, which you can't educate your way out of. That is purely arrest and remove is the only thing that's going to solve that problem. Arrest and remove those individuals from the general population. People that are perpetrating on infants and toddlers is what I'm talking about. So, but the rest of the education, trying to protect children and teach them what they can do. It's not a just say no scenario, because unfortunately, if you look at the statistics on kids that have shared their intimate images online, it's staggering. But we teach them like once you've done it, we teach them the dangers of don't do it, because these are the actual dangers. These are real, you know, things that they don't think about. But then if you have, these are what you can do, like NECMEX, take it down to reporting it, what we can do to help them, what to do with your social media.
What is it? The full spectrum of kids in school from kindergarten to seniors, or?
Obviously, it's content driven on what age appropriate for what they're doing.
Right.
And we also contract with Prevent Child Abuse Vermont to go into schools and give the message as well. I think that was it. Yeah. So that's my biggest thing is increase the penalties on making felonies, because these are significant crimes that they should be treated as.
Barbara, the
Thank you. It's great to be in here and so I have 2 questions. One is, it sounds like sort of the motive of what we were seeing for people who were engaged in revenge pornography doesn't appear in this grouping effort. Like, because in those cases, sometimes it was somebody in state, sometimes it was someone that had moved out of state, but there was definitely like they were pissed and trying to get but that's,
No, not on the financial based stuff. So on the sex based stuff, they're using it just to exploit them for worse and worse content. And unfortunately, they'll get a image and then threaten to expose that and then tell them to do worse and worse stuff. It usually goes from images to videos, and then they'll ask if they have animals at home, if they have siblings at home, and it gets very dark very fast. And these kids feel like they have no way out, and then they do, unfortunately, horrendous things. The kids are the victims. We're never. It's not their fault. They're being exploited by an adult.
so it's great that you're doing prevention education efforts. One of the things that I am going to advocate for is whatever way we can support expanding prevention and education efforts. And I'm wondering, do you have a lot of demand for doing it?
We do. So we used to do. That's why I started contracting with Prevent Child Abuse Vermont years ago, because we were getting inundated with cyber tips, and we have a backlog. And then now that's unfortunate. We just don't have enough people to do the job at this point, because in the last calendar year, I think it was 1,700 and something cyber tips that we received. So we have, at the Attorney General's office, there's myself and I have 4 full-time employees. It started with myself, so we're light years ahead of where we were. But everybody else that does it as a part-time, job. We have federal, state, county, and local officers, but they only can do it when they have the time, which is becoming less and less for everybody because, as you know, like there's a shortage everywhere.
Is the contract with PCAB like a pretty small contract? Like, is that
Yeah,
something?
it is. They basically run out of money from us probably more before 3/4 of the year is out, but luckily they continue to do the job and provide us with their statistics for what they're doing even after that. That's great, but I wish I could fully fund it, but we operate off a grant from OJJDP, and that is funded by Congress. And then there's 5 service providers that get taken off the top, and then the 61 ICACs, it gets an algorithm divides it up. And of course, we're a small state with a population that's smaller than most suburbs. So that's 2 of the first parts of the algorithm, which drops our amount of funding considerably.
And do you know, and maybe we have them in, but if they do like pre and post testing to see if they're effective in changing behavior?
Yeah, so no, we don't have that. And it's hard to do for a variety of reasons. That's because of the embarrassment involved. And
Yeah.
so it's hard to get reliable probabilities, statistics, I mean, from the population.
Thank you so much for being here, and for all the work you're doing.
Thanks.
Really, really difficult work. 2 additional amendments that we may be considering, that I would just wanted to hear your quick take on, if possible. One was adding a provision that would grant a specific immunity to kids, anyone who's willing to come forward and share what's happening to them, so that they are protected from prosecution for the creation of the materials.
Yeah, so I would have no objection to immunity for the victims, because that's what they are in this. But I'm not necessarily sure it's needed. I mean, we're when we instruct other officers on how to investigate these, or no one's ever contemplating charging the kid. They're the victim here.
Yeah.
So again, I would have no problems with it, but I'm not really sure that anybody would be.
I think
trying to charge the chief.
right. I think the thought behind it is probably twofold. One, like ensure that they wouldn't be charged, but also maybe to have one other thing to say to kids, like that.
Yeah.
Be very
The
clear.
biggest problem is their embarrassment. So I get a lot that come through NECMEC where the kids have gotten online, like, because they're afraid to tell their parents. They're afraid to tell a sibling. So they get online, they're trying to figure out how to do it, and they find the NECMEC portal and they make a report through there.
And that's the National Center for Missing and
Yeah,
Exploited
sorry if
Children.
I should have said that. Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah. So they run the cyber tip line. The cyber tip line is any electronic service provider that has any that finds any child exploitation is mandated by federal law to report it to NCMEC, and then anybody can report through NCMEC, and so they have both an online portal and a phone number. So we've had kids do both, call in or report it online, and of course then we track their IP address back to their house and go find them. Not to get them in trouble, but to provide help and make sure that they're not gonna hurt themselves or and to be able to track back the perpetrator. And again, when we do, unfortunately, a lot of times we track them back to overseas,
Right.
Nigeria, the Ivory Coast, or
Right.
hotspots for that.
So the second thing that we're considering adding or, digging into a little bit is this, trying to capture the money mules as well. Do you have any thoughts on that, the importance of that and, maybe mechanism?
So typically, when we're tracking down a money mule on one of these, we're going to charge them federally, to be honest with you, because the teeth are much more, and again, these are not one-hit wonders. They're operating in multiple states, so it's just instead of trying to do a series of prosecutions against like here in New York, California, we would charge them and pick a district, the U.S. district, and charge them federally.
Okay.
So I'm not. Yeah, you have to realize that most of the time we're dealing with the victims here
Okay.
and the perpetrators elsewhere if it's financially based. Again, not saying that, somebody's not gonna try it from Vermont, but a lot of times we're just dealing with the victims.
Okay. And so that hasn't been, we heard testimony from an investigator in Michigan who was saying that had been, he ran into that frustration. That he found, he definitely couldn't reach into other countries, but then they identified 6 people in the United States who were facilitating the money transfers.
Yeah, that's to get around some of the restrictions that were put in place to try to protect everybody. Basically, they put somebody, usually a foreign national, over here in the U.S. From wherever they're from, and then operating here to get the money and then send it to them. So, but again, I know that people heard the Ryan Last story from California. Heard about that at all? It's a horrendous case. It was very quick sextortion. I actually have some of the presentation material here on it. It went really fast. Unfortunately, he was give me a second. They actually got a money mule on that case.
We were talking about the Jordan DeMay case, which
Yeah,
we would be
yeah,
familiar with.
yeah. So I mean, here's one. This is one thing. This is a thing. It says one is too many. And these are 8 different, unfortunately, children that committed suicide based off of this. Ryan Last was unfortunately one of them. And it was a case. It was a California ICAC that did this case, and he was a Boy Scout, agricultural student in the association there, applying for college, had no problems, no history of mental illness, no issues at all. And unfortunately, it was seemed like a normal night. He went to his bedroom at 9:30 in the evening. His brother had seen that his light was on around midnight, which was abnormal. And then the brother left to go to school at 7:30 in the morning. And what he didn't notice is he actually walked under his brother hanging out a bedroom window. He'd hung himself out his window that night. So his parents had to unfortunately, untie him he'd hung himself on the bedpost out the window. One's outside trying to hold him up, and the other's trying to get him down. Unfortunately, he'd been long past. He'd done it the night before. And again, this was an A student, active in school, Boy Scout, and on college trips. But no one can understand why he did this at first, and that someone was blackmailing him. But he had left some notes to his parents, which included investigators, and they called the ICAC luckily right away. Got there, got into his phones, and were able to start doing preservation letters and tracking it down across the internet. And they found it went very fast. It was once they got the images from him, the chatter went started demanding $5,000 or he's going to expose his photos. He's telling him that they have no, he doesn't have any way to pay him. He's begging, and it's very incredibly sad. Text back and forth about he's just begging, please don't do this, you're ruining my life. And he sees no way out. Didn't feel like he could talk to anybody, and so it's just horrendous stories like that. That's why I say these crimes should not be a 2-year misdemeanor. This should be a significant felony.
Yeah, I would just, probably not right now, but, at some point, I'd love to talk with you about about your thoughts on holding the social media platforms accountable, and, that they're facilitating this straight up, that the access they grant, and they know that it's happening. And so I'd love to hear from your perspective when the time is right, some ways to get it at that accountability as well.
For considering the penalty for these and considering extradition from other states, I know like they vary depending on the state and like what is considered a felony and all that. Are there particular states that we're seeing copycat individuals in particularly that we could like look at what their extradition laws are so that we can ensure that whatever we're considering for a penalty, we're at least educating ourselves on what it's
Right. So if you, just because you make a maximum penalty higher doesn't mean that it's going to be sentenced like that, right? That we have on the books now for a lot of our child sexual abuse material laws, it's 5 years and then 10 years, and then depending on which statute it is. But rarely do we see them sentenced for that. So I wouldn't see why you would make this like a 10-year felony right off the bat. Again, it's going to be situational dependent. It has to be adjudicated, and the judge has the sentencing hearing. So it doesn't mean that's what they're getting. You're not setting a mandatory minimum, but the maximum should not be 2 years. And that's my opinion.
So, Herb, I'm just curious, are there particular states where you're seeing copycat individuals so that we can look at their...
Yeah, they popped up just in random states. So there's not like a hot spot. No.
Okay.
So.
Any other questions?
Yeah, just one. I think you had mentioned 1,700 tips a year now. Is that what you said?
Yeah, that's what we're up to.
And I remember right before COVID, it was like 400 or 500 maybe.
So when I took over the cyber tip line a long time ago now, we were getting like 6 cyber tips a month. I think last month I got 195.
How many were you when you first started?
Like 6 a month. Yeah. So I think in the first year, if I'm going off memory now, so don't hold me accountable for this, but I think the first year that we took over the cyber tip line, there was like 135 cyber tips that year. And now, like I said, just in calendar year, of course, you're going to see 3 different sets of stats from us, and that's because we're federal, we operate off a federal grant, so we have federal fiscal that we have to report for that. And then each year we're asked for a state fiscal, a report for the legislature, and then many times everybody's asking for calendar year stats. So last calendar year, that's the last stats I just actually composed, so that's how I can remember them. But in the calendar year 2025, it was like 1,749, I think, 1,749 cyber tips. And again, that's all child exploitation cyber tips, dealing with either luring, enticement, child sexual abuse material, sextortion.
I think you also said the numbers are up this time of year is because people are inside and.
So we see a like spikes throughout the year, and this time of year, for some reason, we always see a spike. And it's impossible to really say what the causation is, but I think in northeastern states, people are spending a lot more time inside online, less to do outside, especially recently with the cold and lots of snow. So we definitely do see an increase this time of year. And there's a lot of other things that go into that, right? Like think about in 2011, how many platforms there were online, and think about how many there are now. Think about how many things exist today that you can put an app on your phone for that weren't there 5 years ago. So every time there's more applications, there's more, you know, more accessibility if kids are on there too, to perpetrate on kids on that, and then it's going to create more cyber tips. And so they just continue to go up every year.
I know it's already been said, but just to thank you for what you do. So I'm gonna guess that you're probably one of the longer tenured ICAC investigators in the country, because I can't believe, well, I know it's not a job that people keep for a lot of years because of what you do, what you hear, what you see, and just kudos to you for what you do, especially for how long you've done things.
Yeah, I am one of the, if not at this point, the longest standing ICAC commander left at the ICAC commander. We meet quarterly with all the other ICAC commanders. And most of them are that new for a long time are gone now. But everybody's got a fill limit on this. We've had some outstanding investigators that only lasted a few years. They just couldn't take the content, which there's no bad thoughts on that, because everybody's got a fill limit on this. To me, it's every time we rescue dozens and dozens of kids. And every time we rescue a kid that wasn't crying out for abuse, but a cyber tip led us to them, we got us removed from that situation and got them a better life. That's why, because it gives that kid a better chance at life. And we all know the long-term victims of this, unfortunately, have had some real train wrecks of lives. And the faster that we can get to them, the faster we can get them services, the better outcomes they're going to have for the rest of their life. To me, that's the most rewarding thing. I've done everything in law enforcement, from homicides to arson to, I've investigated it all at this point. And this, to me, it's the darkest area, but it's the most rewarding because it has the best chance of better outcomes for kids.
Tom?
I was just wondering if you had any like data on common age of the aggressor in this, or common biographical data
For the suspects.
for the suspect person interested.
So for sex-based extortion, it can be anything from juveniles all the way up to unlimited age. And for the financial ones, I actually don't, because a lot of times, again, we track it across to Nigeria, and then can't go over there and arrest them. So early on, when it was really ballooning, there were two task force formed, one for Nigeria and one for the Ivory Coast. One was assigned to the FBI and one was assigned to Homeland Security. And I know Homeland Security went over, and I get them confused at this point who had which area, so I apologize for that. But Homeland Security actually went over and made a series of arrests and extradited people and brought them back here, which was great. So we would investigate them up until that point, and then we had a single point of contact where we would package the case up and say, okay, we had all the victim did examination of the victim devices, interviewed the victim, tracked back through the IP where it originated in either the Ivory Coast or Nigeria, and to what location over there, and then packaged it up and handed it off to the task force to continue the work over there. And they were aggregating stuff and finding commonality in all the victims. Again, when someone's doing this, they're doing it on a mass scale usually. Rarely, I've never seen somebody extort somebody a single time, either sex-based or financially based, and not continue to do it with multiple victims, usually lots. We're talking hundreds.
And so your victims could be right across the board though, too, whatever they find.
Yeah. Yeah. So the one we just did here, we're still going through the device. That takes a long time. And we're just uncovering victims, and then we have to package a case up, and then we have a portal that we can provide it to the other ICACs, and then the other ICAC then has to go out and find that victim, so we have the suspect here. So it's incredibly amount of work because it's going down a rabbit hole, multiple victims. And of course, there's a point of diminishing return on the criminality piece where like they're not gonna get a longer sentence. But that's not our focus. Our focus is victims. So why we're trying to find out the victims isn't to add more and more years, although from what I see, they deserve it. We're just trying to get to the victims, get them services. The faster we get them services, the better outcomes they're gonna have.
Okay.
Did you testify in here last year too?
I've testified both in the Senate and here numerous times, so and I get them confused in my age at this point, so.
So where I'm going with this, and I apologize if I missed it being late, but are cases up this year over last year?
Yeah, a lot,
A lot.
yeah. Yeah, they just keep going up every year.
And last year, would you have 3 people or did you have 4 people last year?
So last year, I'm trying to remember when we had everybody. Last year, we had four people and myself, yeah.
And you're still maintaining that, but you need more.
Yeah, we at this point can't triage all the cases that we're.
And does Agency of Digital Services, does that reflect on you guys at all? Does that help at all? To
Yes.
try to-
No, so we actually have our own servers because we have child sexual abuse material on it. We ran an operation, chat operation where people came to a house saying they were going to engage in sex with like a 13-year-old. And unfortunately, we had a manager from ADS show up, was a 3-year-old in the back seat, the car seat, to have sex with a 13-year-old. This is several years ago. The person was arrested and no longer works for the state, obviously. I think we originally charged him federally and he settled for state protection. So no, we can't have somebody else have access to this stuff. That person would have seen it was an operation, would have avoided detection and would be harming kids today. So no, we don't use ADS for any of our infrastructure. We do it all ourselves.
That totally
They've
makes
not
sense.
gone through background checks, they've not gone through all the stuff that we had to do to get to where we are.
That totally makes sense to me, but my next question, you just knocked the hell out of me with a 3-year-old.
Sorry.
It's reality. I mean, we need, I'm quite sure I asked this question last time you were here, but we're always behind on what's happening on the internet. We're never going to get ahead of it. I mean, we can't think as devious as what those minds are thinking, unless you've got some dark minds that, and maybe you do, which good if we do, I guess. But how do we get ahead of how do we even begin to get this under control?
We're not gonna be able to do it alone. I mean, Vermont has made huge changes in this. The Cloud Act that was passed nationally, that was started because we actually sued Google and we sued Microsoft based off them not providing content and search warrants, and that got it changed nationally for everybody. So we have made huge changes just from little old Vermont. But what it's going to take is, I'm going way off script here, but tech companies have a lot of the keys to control this and to temper down a lot of this themselves if they would put the resources and time and
So the tech companies you've been after and lack of a better word, have a little bit of success with them. When you're dealing with the other states in these and extradition or whatever it's called, working together with them and all that stuff, do you find most states are you're all working together?
yeah, I will say in law enforcement, this is probably the tightest knit collective that I've ever worked with. Everybody does it. I mean, it's a real dark place to work, and you do it because it's not something you do because you wanted a 9 to 5 and no weekend job, because these come in all the time. You do it because you care about saving kids. And everybody has the same thought process. So there's 61 ICACs across the country. There's 5,400 law enforcement officers involved between the affiliates and the lead agencies.
There's only 61 ICAC in the whole
There's
United
61
States?
ICACs, meaning like Vermont ICAC is one of there's 60 others. Yeah, and then there's a lead agency for each ICAC. So in Vermont, the lead agency is the Attorney General's office, and then there's affiliate agencies that sign agreements to operate under the same rules, because we have to have everybody operate the same way so that cases can be, and the 61 ICAC committers adopt these rules so that cases can be transferred easily between all the ICACs, so everybody's doing everything the same way in the correct way.
Thank you. Thank you for what you do.
But I have a couple questions I want to dig down into this just a little bit more to make sure I understand this. So with respect to ICAC, and I'm looking at the language, we have B1 is when somebody's actually disclosed, and B2 is a threat to disclose image.
Yeah.
So is most of your work done in the B1 realm where there's actually been disclosures?
No, so rarely is they disclosing anything. So on both sides. So again, you kind of got to think of this in the two different buckets, the two different motivators of why you're doing this. One is sex-based. They're just looking for content. The other is money-based. They don't care about the content. They're just looking for money. They almost never share them out because it's just more liability for them, right? Because especially if it's kids, they're sharing child sexual abuse material that's just distributing. That can get them serious time. So they're really just in for the quick hit of how they're just trying to get as much money from this kid as possible, and then they're going to come back, try to get more money. So they're not really giving the photos out anywhere, or the images, videos, the files anywhere. And then the sex-based ones, they're not disclosing them out to the greater public or anything. If they do disclose them, they're using them as trading cards, trading material with other like-minded pedophiles to get their content. But by and large, most of them aren't trading with anybody. They're just keeping the material. They're using it for sexual gratification or to get money, but they're not actually providing it out anymore. And that was one of the weaknesses I saw with this was the 5-year. There was a 5-year penalty in here somewhere.
Yeah,
But that was for actually providing the images out, which rarely happens. It's the threat is they threaten to put the images out to either get more content or to get money, but they don't actually do it.
Right.
By and large, most of the time.
Okay, so
We can never use never in this, because as soon as I say that, I'll go back and get a case where they do. But it's very, very rare. Say it's like an institute on this.
So the need for, I'm sorry, the need for the felony is really on page 10, it's line 17, 18. That's where we have the misdemeanor. If that's related to the threat.
Yeah, so no person shall threaten, so then it would be page 10, line 17, I guess, 17 and 18. Yeah, so.
And the reason I say is I'm looking at B1, and it's kind of interesting with B1, if there's a disclosure, it doesn't sound like that happens that much in the world. The intent is kind of interesting because that provision started from our so-called revenge porn, that somebody has disclosed an image really to harm and harass. But we also have in here intimidate, threaten, or coerce. And I guess that could happen in the so-called revenge porn scenario as well. And part of the reason why so if that's not the provision that we're worried about extraditing people, it sounds like it's
the latter. Yeah, it's the latter one. We're doing all the victim work here, and then they're in another state. We've had luck where the other states are charging them. But if we had a case where we had a case where we did want to charge, then this would be problematic.
Right. Okay. All right.
And I just think for what they're causing, the harm that they're causing these kids, it should not be a 2-year misdemeanor. Just on the threats for equity purposes, I just don't think that makes sense.
Right. And yeah, so looking really at B2 is what
yes.
You're talking about. Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you. Any other questions? thank you again for what you do and for being witness. Always good to hear from you. Always great testimony on a not very uplifting subject.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's absolutely fine. It's what we do in here. So Dominica, if you could join us, thank you for being here as well. Our Chief of the Criminal Division of the Attorney General's Office.
Dominica,
Nice to see you again.
nice to see you too. Thank you for, again, taking up these conversations. They're so important. And as you heard, Commander Raymond, they impact so many that you will never know. I did have the benefit of watching some of the previous testimony, really impactful of Walker's father and Riley's mother. You know, the thing that really struck, first of all, there's in working with victims, a lot of times it's very hard to effectively communicate loss, effectively take something that is one of the most painful things you could ever imagine and be able to talk about it and to be able to get to a place where you use the memory of what happened in a more positive light. I was really struck by how wonderful they were in communicating what happened to them and their mission to talk to everyone about what happened. I found, and what you've heard too, and just my work in this area as well, you heard how fast it happens, right? Like sex crimes in general, they're crimes of silence. They happen in rooms. They're alone. It's a very isolating thing. And this crime is no different. These sextortion cases, as you heard, take places in rooms overnight, very quickly. And it is a crime of leveraging fear and shame, right? And I thought it was really interesting when I think it was Walker's father who talked about, we know how to talk about drinking with our kids. We know how to talk about drugs. We do that whole thing where we say, you know, you are so much more important to me than the fact that you got drunk or your friends get drunk. Before you get in that car, please call me. Like, you know, no trouble from me. You can use me as an excuse, like whatever it is. And, you know, do the same thing with drugs. Your life is more important. If you take something, please tell us what it is. Your friend took some, give me a call. I will help. No questions asked. This is what's happening. But it's really hard to have the same conversation about this because you just didn't know this existed, right? This conversation. How do we have this conversation about something so intimate, so personal in a time when, you know, teens like secrecy, they like their privacy, they're testing boundaries, like, you know, all of those things that are good for developmental reasons. It's also really terrifying when it happens, and predators, whether they're financial, sexual, they will exploit weakness. And that's kind of, you know, where we are with this. I think about years ago, sexual assault still happened to children. They just didn't have the words to tell you what was happening to them. They weren't armed with that. Now they are. You have those, it's outdated to say good touch, bad touch. It's like boundaries. But you know, we go into classrooms and we talk about body boundaries. We talk about those things in age-appropriate ways. As young as kindergarten, that's kind of how it is. So that message is reinforced and reinforced and reinforced. This is just the beginning of the conversations that we need to have in order to arm children with the ability to be able to be in that room by themselves and be able to, I think Riley's mom definitely said, to push away from the device, to say that this world I can get help from and push it away and ask for help. You know, as Commander Raymond said, these kids aren't scared that they're going to get in trouble with law enforcement. They're terrified that anyone's going to know. And that's kind of where the problem lies, is that trying to figure out how do we get to them, because devices are pervasive. It's not going anywhere. So we really have to figure out a way to arm children with how do we handle this and how can they talk to us about this when something is happening, and what are the things that we can do and the ways that we can use what we know to help give them better defenses in ways when they're very defenseless at night by themselves and this attack happens and it's fast. So that's just kind of in general in terms of the education component, I was so glad to hear that piece because it's really important. When it gets to the criminality of it, we're past that part. But it is important that what's happening, just like Riley and Walker's mom and dad, you know, to talk about, well, how did we get here and what are the steps that we can use to kind of make outcomes different. But when they do happen, what are the tools that we can use to make sure that there is accountability? And I think that, you know, this bill addresses some of those concerns and tries to get at the ever-evolving digital space that is outpaces our thought and outpaces just the rhythm of how we make laws, prosecute them, and hold people accountable. So Commander Raymond really gave the Attorney General's view on this, on those particulars. I know that I think it was Kim that had pointed out about the non-consensual thing, and that has already been addressed. And that really is one of those things I think Commander Raymond effectively pointed out. When it happens, it is consensual with air quotes. And that's the grooming, a quick grooming period. It's deception. They think that they're talking to someone that they want to talk to and someone that they want to share pictures with and all of that in this protective bubble. Then when they have that image, the video, whatever it is, then it turns. And as Commander Raymond said, you know, there are two types of people that do this. This is the sexual piece of it, and then there's the financial piece. And the financial piece is really hard to address because it doesn't have boundaries. We need to coordinate and find ways to do that in ways that we've not done before. The ICACs are really wonderful in how we can seamlessly transfer cases and figure out who is best positioned to hold people accountable. But when you're talking about people in the Ivory Coast, it's very difficult for a Vermont prosecutor to do that. What we can do and what we do is be a little piece of that investigation that could help support those bigger prosecutions across the nation. And we do play those parts often. And that is also between states and all those things. So in the interest of time, and I know there's other witnesses, I'm happy to take questions or if you have anything that you want me to address.
I assume AI is just gonna make us just blossom way more faster and just put us even further behind.
AI is our newest obstacle, and we're trying to figure out how to navigate it. It is a problem of reality, and it's also a legal conundrum a little bit with our current case law. There's a very famous Supreme Court decision, an Ashcroft decision, where they basically were just talking about how do we balance things like free speech and the need to protect children, which is one of the most compelling interests that the state has. And there's a dissent in the opinion where it said at some point, someday, we may get to the point where we won't be able to distinguish between a fake and what's real. And at that point, there may need to be a realignment of what it means to protect children versus balancing those rights. And I think we're there. I think we're really there. So yes, it is something that in every meeting on this topic, AI comes up. Everyone's trying to figure out the best ways to navigate it. Some states are doing some work, but it will eventually have to end up at the Supreme Court.
So just another thing with that, there's already been lawsuits with Google, was it Google and Meta or something like that?
Facebook, all of those, yeah.
Is there, do you follow this? Do you have the same guidelines of what you can follow with the people that do the AI stuff? Or is that a whole different animal? Because I don't know. All I know is that stuff scares the hell out of me.
It is terrifying. I mean, I do remember even 5 years ago, we were kind of saying, well, we don't really see it. Now we see it. And trying to prove what's real and what's not, we still are able to do that. I don't know how much longer that will hold true. But it really is trying to find out, how do we hold people accountable in doing this? It used to be very clear. I mean, the images were terrible. The real decision between, cartoons, you could have cartoons of children having sex, and that's fine, because it wasn't real. Now
Pretty disturbing.
those cartoons are very sophisticated cartoons anymore. They look like kids. And so the world of fantasy it's getting harder to distinguish. So it's just one of those things that we keep up with as best we can, and we'll figure out how to navigate it as we move along.
So tougher laws and prosecuting, prosecution and tougher laws might do something to curb some of this.
Expanding
Although-
definitions.
Although the people we're dealing with have very, trying to find a diplomatic word to use, sophisticated minds, for lack of a better word, than what a normal person would think.
They're very motivated by their interests. There are groups of them. They network, as you heard Commander Raymond, when you do have someone who is dealing with this for a sexual reason, it's, they trade with each other. They try and keep it really. I remember having a case once where it was someone who had 80. It's the first time that anyone had ever caught him in this, but the collection that he had of CSAM material was breathtaking. And it had already circled back to the early, it was the 50s or 60s, where they had, you needed a dark room. There was only one place to do this. And there was this whole network of a dark room person who you would send all of those to, but you would have to send them to unless you had your own dark room. When you think about it today, what you can accomplish from your computer in your own home, wild. And with that, you could just see the collection of the tools that he used and what he needed until the very end, where most of them were on storage devices, and he actually would print things out and had them in like photo books in his basement.
And I hope he got nabbed and nabbed good, and
I took
he's,
care of that. Don't you worry about it. Don't you worry about it.
thank you.
Angela?
Domenica, thank you for your testimony, and I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on the other provisions in the bill relating to our changes we're proposing to the voyeurs and statute. Any thoughts on, penalties and the expansion of the statute of limitations on the criminal side, and the removal of the statute of limitations on the civil side?
Yes, so I am always someone who I like longer statute of limitations. I think anytime you're talking about digital space, the shelf life of those crimes can be very long. And, when you think about legislation is so responsive to changing norms or kind of just a better data that kind of comes out when you think about now sexual assaults do not have statute of limitations because we understand trauma a little bit more. The person, of course, knows when they've been victimized, but they might not be able to have the tools to talk about it, or they feel safe enough until years and years later. And we used to be barred, and it was like whatever's earlier disclosure plus, 10 years or whatever arbitrary number kind of got put to it. Now we don't have that. And those are really great breathing spaces to say, I can't tell you how many times I've worked with children who have experienced child abuse, sexual trauma, and their mother has disclosed to me their own sexual trauma and their own abuse. I used to have to say, I can't do anything about that, right? Like, I couldn't. Now I could say something different. And that's been a really great thing. So, when you think about kind of, and the numbers are arbitrary, and that, of course, I understand why you have to put a fine point on it sometimes, because there has to be finality in the law. That's one of the reasons it exists, that it's a decision that's made and people move forward from there. But any time that we can have an extended statute of limitations that makes sense based on the harm that's being caused or how someone would find out about it. When you're talking about some of these places where, not everybody visits the sites that might come up with some of those things or have those kind of, you don't know how it's ever going to unfold, because it has such a long shelf life, that you may not know that this has been posted somewhere or someone's seen it or it's been being exchanged until a really long time after. And then there's also strange things sometimes that happen when, especially when it's like a disclosure about when did the statute of limitations start and when do they? Was it when the person uploaded it to a site? Is it when you saw it? Is it the last time someone looked at it? And since you can look at it at any point, there's a theory of ongoing, that it resets itself every time, because the possibility of somebody just accessing it can be any day. So there's a lot of different theories that we attach to statute of limitations when we talk about the fine points of it. So anytime that we can avoid some of those fights, and trying to get us close to that, the better. And so that's kind of, in general, my thoughts on statute of limitations in terms of digital print.
So I'd like to back up a little bit to the sextortion part of the bill. So we've talked about the need, probably, which I agree with, particularly with respect to bringing folks in from other states, the threat meaning of a felony level crime. But so if a death results, if there is a death by suicide, is there another provision that would be that would capture that, or should we have an enhancement here for this kind of behavior resulting in somebody dying by suicide?
Seen other states kind of tackle, and I did hear previous testimony where this kind of was a floated idea. I think maybe it was the undersheriff talking about felony murder. Felony murder rule is kind of a controversial legal term, where basically, you would have in terms of murder, it's all about intent. The law is all about intent, so that you can make sure that, is it specific intent? Like, I intended to do this, or is it reckless? Like, I should have known that when I did this, this could cause this kind of harm. Felony murder is something where it says, in something very defined. So Vermont has some defined pieces. It's sexual assault, it's arson, those kinds of things where your intent doesn't have to be the death of somebody. And usually in a homicide, you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that that's your intent to kill somebody, the premeditation, all of it. I mean, it can happen in seconds. Premeditation is one of those things where it seems like it should be a long time and it's not. It can be seconds. But we'd still have to prove how that is and what that looked like. Felony murder takes away the intent to kill and replaces it with the intent to commit a specific crime. And when you have the intent to, say, sexually assault somebody, but within that sexual assault, they happened to die, then that I don't have to prove that the intent was to kill. I have to prove the intent was to do this specific crime, and then the death resulted from it. So we have some of those. I would say, and some states don't. Sometimes if it's a felony, you do felony murder. I mean, so disproportionately across the nation, the evolution of those crimes sometimes are very disproportionately prosecuted because they are so discretionary. You could pick anything and have it do that, and the result of a homicide conviction is huge. So there is that. So some states limited those particular provisions, and they particularly said this, or this. We have them. I do think there is a way that we could, under the right circumstances, use involuntary manslaughter. when you think about an involuntary manslaughter, it is just that you have, it's a reckless standard. It's basically saying that what you were doing was so reckless that of course it caused harm, and this is what resulted in it. Think about some, and it's a creative, it's kind of a catch-all in the homicide statutes. And I'm not sure if you've seen some of the way that it's been used across the country lately. The cyberbullying in Massachusetts, where, it was just this attack, like kill yourself, no, never touched the person, but it did result in them taking their life. That was a successful involuntary manslaughter prosecution under the theory of this was what was happening. You were, of course, isolating this person, bringing them down, after them and harassing them, and it caused this full series of events where they took their life. You've also seen some of the parents being held responsible for mass shootings, where they were aware of what was happening, or should have been. So there is a way that I think some of these things could fit into our manslaughter law without having to specifically do it. I do think that there are some states that have put this in specifically, and it might have been under the felony murder rule. I haven't looked at a lot of the national ones, but a little bit that I saw, that's where it's been fitting.
So do you think it's sufficient that our laws now can be used to try to capture an individual who does undertake this behavior and it results in death?
I think there's an argument to be made. Of course it would be novel, as they all are, but I think there's a way to do it. I'm not saying you couldn't add this to the felony murder piece, but I will just say, in taking a look at it, of the things that we have now, they're very physical based. Like it is, my hands are on you, right? It's a kidnapping. It's an arson in which it starts a fire in which you're known to have been there, like kidnapping. This is a novel approach, saying that this is not someone that you're ever touching, right? This is something that is happening coercively and sometimes very, very fast in that space. So it really is a new frontier, a way of thinking about how do we hold people accountable on it. It really is a policy choice about how you want to proceed.
So before I get to Tom, what's the downside of actually putting an enhancement in for, tying it to recklessness?
There's none. If anything, what is always so helpful, no matter where you kind of put anything, is to make sure that your intent is known, so that when we're in the courtrooms and we're, arguing this in front of judges and things, saying that these set of circumstances is exactly what the legislature had in mind here. It's also something that would direct us to, if we had the ability to charge something very specific, it would mean that we wouldn't do a manslaughter. We wouldn't try and fit it somewhere else, that it would more naturally flow in a certain area that you all had decided was the most appropriate way to address it.
No, the last two things brought up address my question. Like language.
Yeah, I think so. Any other questions for them? Not seeing any. So we're going to take a break. So we'll